Peru, President Pedro Castillo has launched the second agrarian reform. The program's goal is to boost the capacities of more than 2 million small agricultural producers. In Bolivia, social movements and grassroots organizations declare an emergency state in defense of democracy. At least 12 civilians were killed by a bomb attack in the entrance of a mosque in the Afghan capital, Kabul, most likely targeting Taliban leaders. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and now we begin with the news. In Peru, President Pedro Castillo has launched the second agrarian reform. The program's goal is to boost the capacities of more than 2 million small agricultural producers with financing and infrastructure works, among other actions. President Castillo also rejected the rumors about alleged expropriations and confiscations of his initiative and said that his government will focus on the development of family and cooperative farming and launched 9 axes of integral regarding this agrarian reform. He also highlighted the application of technological innovations to the agricultural and industrial production processes with a view to the export of the products.
So important as a worker and campesino, and even more as a teacher, to tell our sons and daughters that these are the real centers for Peru, to do what we have had to envy. We went abroad these days, and at the UN and the OAS, the first thing we did with the businessmen was to say that in Peru there is real wealth. We will not only be the ones that we send and export as an exporting country, but we will also bring technology from there.
The president also talked about his interest in industrializing the nation's available resources.
As well as in Pichare, as well as in the north to process potatoes, as well as in the south to industrialize lithium, why not recover gas? This is the eagerness in which the government is involved.
The plenary chamber of the Colombian Constitutional Court extended the period of operation of the Truth Commission, which will now last until June 2022. The plenary supported the arguments presented by the magistrate Jorge Enrique Ibáñez Najara, who indicated that for the 3-year period established for the peace agreement for the Commission, the biosecurity measures adopted to fight the COVID-19 pandemic should not be considered. In its decision, the court ordered the national government and the Congress of the Republic to take the necessary steps to ensure the effective functioning of the Truth Commission, including the respective budget allocations for 2021 and 2022. 4 people were wounded and police were shot in a new clash between prisoners at the Ecuadorian prison, where 118 people were killed just days earlier in the country's deadliest inmate riot. Police Commander Tanya Varela said there was a shootout between inmates at the prison in Guayaquil. Officers neutralized the confrontation and maintained control of the prison. According to information released by the force, elite police teams entered the facility, supported by soldiers and a military tank. 2 rifles, 3 pistols, ammunition, and cell phones were seized in the prison. The detention facility has space for around 5,000 inmates, but it houses more than 8,000, 60% more than capacity. In his Angelus prayer, Pope Francis has deplored the terrible outbreak of violence in the prison of Guayaquil in Ecuador, asking those who work every day to make life in prisons more human.
I was very saddened by what happened in the past days in the prison of Guayaquil, Ecuador. A terrible outbreak of violence between inmates belonging to rival gangs has caused more than 100 deaths and many injuries. I pray for them and their families. God help us to heal the wounds of crime that enslave the poorest and help those who work every day to make life in prisons more human.
On Saturday, thousands took to the streets in Brazil and around the world to protest against Jair Bolsonaro. Our correspondent, Brian Muir, has the details.
On Saturday, October 2nd, protests took place in 305 cities in Brazil and around the world demanding the ouster of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro and a halt to the Washington Consensus-style privatizations and austerity measures, which began after the U.S.-supported 2016 coup.
Nearly 600,000 people died in Brazil because Bolsonaro is a science denialist. He didn't buy vaccines on time. He doesn't take care of the poor, and he's ended important public policies for women, for the black population, and for the whole population of Brazil.
The protests were organized by a broad-based coalition of unions, social movements, and political parties called Fora Bolsonaro. They began early in the morning in small towns, and as the day progressed, gradually moved to larger and larger cities, culminating with an estimated crowd of 100,000 on São Paulo's Avenida Paulista.
The World Women March is out there today because it is impossible to coexist with a genocidal, hypocritical assassin in the presidency, who condemns the women and poor people of this country to death by hunger and elimination of rights. This is why we are here with the social movement to say out with Bolsonaro.
Organizers estimate that in all, around 700,000 people came out to the streets to demand out with Bolsonaro. Brian Mir, Telesur, São Paulo.
Now we address other topics. Spain will provide $239 million to help the island of La Palma to recover from its volcanic eruption. During a visit to the island, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said the cabinet will approve a package of very powerful measures to assist in areas such as infrastructure reconstruction, water supply, employment, agriculture and tourism. The Cumbre Vieja volcano began its eruption on September 19th and has destroyed more than 900 buildings. About 6,000 people have been evacuated from homes on the island out of a population of about 83,000. The financial package is the second stage of a plan approved last week. The first stage saw the government announce aid of $12.3 million for the immediate assistance of those who had lost their homes.
Next Tuesday, the cabinet meeting is going to approve a very powerful package of measures, very powerful in terms of infrastructure reconstruction, in terms of the response to the water supply problem, in terms of employment, in terms of agriculture, in terms of the tourism sector, in terms of tax benefits for a total amount of more than 200 million euros. We do not know when the volcanic eruption will end, but what the people of La Palma should know is that, regardless of when the volcanic eruption ends, the Spanish government, all the institutions, will be there to face the enormous task of rebuilding La Palma and to offer a horizon of prosperity, progress and tranquility to the people of La Palma.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Bolivia experienced in the last days a new attack of the violent sectors that consummated the coup d'etat of 2019. Therefore, social movements and grassroots organizations declare an emergency state in defense of democracy. In Cochabamba, in the center of the nation, an expanded department of the Movement to Socialism declared a state of emergency in defense of the process of change and the patriotic symbols and ratified that they will not allow a new coup d'etat. They analyzed the different points of conflict that the violent extreme right would begin to generate in different regions of the country. In the meeting, they agreed to make calls with the 16 provinces and 6 federations of the tropic to carry out peaceful mobilizations.
The right wing has begun to generate points of conflict in the country, in La Paz with the coca growers, in Santa Cruz with the indigenous march, and in Cochabamba, the illegal mayor, as we can say, Manfred Reyes Villa, because he practically has a lot of legal processes against him, and some of them have already been sentenced.
And regarding the situation being experienced in Bolivia, the spokesperson of the Presidency of the Republic, Jorge Richer, affirmed during an interview for national media that the nation is living crucial hours in which it can be seen how the authors of the coup d'etat, those responsible for the deaths of Sankara and Sekaba, are consolidating an alliance that guarantees their impunity.
In the effort to achieve their political objective, here we can make a quick allusion to this, political objectives of reinstalling a 1990s state model in the country. This means an absolutely neoliberal state model, administered and managed by the great economic oligarchies of our country that have the economic concentration, administered and managed by the old representative of the lobbyism of conservatism, of those sectors that build their political logics on the basis of exclusion. That state was the one they tried to reinstall in November 2019. Now what they are looking for, in what they call in defense of democracy, is basically to be able to destabilize the government management.
And we remain in Bolivia. A criminal court of instruction in the city of La Paz extended for 5 months the preventive detention of Yanin Áñez, former de facto president of Bolivia after the 2019 coup d'etat. The measure, also adopted this Saturday, also applies to 2 other officials, the ex-Minister of Justice, Álvaro Coimbra, and the Minister of Energy, Rodrigo Guzmán. Áñez has been held since March in the Miraflores Female Penitentiary in La Paz as a preventive measure given the risk of flight and obstruction of the judicial process. The former official is charged with the crimes of sedition, terrorism, and conspiracy for her participation in the events of November 2019, which left 37 dead, 804 injured, and thousands persecuted and tortured. Mobilizations commemorating the 3rd anniversary of Catalonia's independence referendum began this Sunday in Barcelona, Spain. Protesters demanded Carles Puigdemont's pardon in light of Spain's ongoing extradition request from Italy, while Italy's judiciary deliberated the extradition's legality under European Union law. Though the demonstrations will unlikely continue centering their efforts on the Catalonia's 2017 pro-independence referendum, it is also expected that Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez to reject such a notion for the foreseeable future. Experts stated that the further dialogue between the national government and Catalonia on policy considerations around greater economic benefits for the region will be on the agenda.
Those of us who are in favor of independence have not jumped off the bandwagon, and the government of Generalitat, which has pro-independence majority, needs to get its act together once and for all and take sides and apply what we voted for, which is the unilateral declaration of independence. The social mass is there. I don't know anyone who has stopped being a pro-independence activist. Now it's a matter of political leaders joining us, and we can all do it together well.
This Saturday, the government of Nicaragua confirmed that the youth population will be immunized against COVID-19 with the Cuban vaccines Abdala, Soberana, and Soberana O2. Nicaraguan families will be able to voluntarily vaccinate their children from 2 to 17 years of age with the Cuban anti-COVID-19 shots, as confirmed by the Vice President of the Central American nation, Rosario Murillo. She explains that the minors' immunization will be carried out with the consent of their parents. Nicaragua approved the emergency use of these 3 immunogens manufactured by Biocuba Pharma that have already been successfully used in Cuba, which today shows an encouraging decrease in the number of contagions thanks to the successful vaccination campaign. This makes Nicaragua the 4th country after Iran, Venezuela, and Vietnam to approve the emergency use of Cuban antiviral drugs. The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, insisted on Saturday on the need to maximize compliance with the health measures against the COVID-19 pandemic in order to safeguard the gradual activation of services throughout the territory. At a meeting of the governmental group of confronting the sanitary emergency held at the Palace of the Revolution in Havana, the president warned that the enthusiasm for the progress made in controlling the epidemiological situation should not cloud the minds of those responsible. The Caribbean nation reported 4,873 new cases of the disease on Sunday, the lowest figure in just 1 day since last July. The director of epidemiology of the Ministry of Public Health, Francisco Duran, highlighted the sustained decrease in the number of contagions and active cases, figures that shows the progress made by Cuban society in the fight against the pandemic.
The number of active cases decreased by a total of 25,788. We are talking about 1,370 less than those reported yesterday, and the number of active cases has been decreasing over the last 5 days, mainly due to the number of Delta that occurred, which on that day were 6,196, representing 1,322 more than the number of cases diagnosed that day, thus reducing the number of active cases on the one hand and increasing the number of recovered cases, which in Cuba represents 96.2% of the total number of active cases.
And the president of the Caribbean nation pointed out that progress made in vaccination and the impact on the level of contagions and deaths due to COVID-19. In addition, he called for the maintenance of biosanitary measures that will allow a scenario of new normality with epidemiological security to materialize.
We are now seeing the most decisive impact of vaccination, which is not yet complete because we still have 40% with the 3 doses. But with no doubt, there are already 4 or 5 provinces that remain below 100 cases. The number of deaths has decreased.
And we'll have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. A bomb exploded in the entrance of a mosque in the Afghan capital Kabul on Sunday, killing at least 12 civilians. The bomb targeted the sprawling Eidah Mosque in Kabul, where a memorial service was being held for the mother of the Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid. Taliban fighters were not harmed in the attack. Those killed in the attack were civilians standing outside the mosque gate. No one immediately claimed responsibility for this attack. However, since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan in mid-August, attacks by Islamic State groups' militants against them have increased. It considers the Taliban an enemy. The Islamic State has claimed several attacks against the Taliban, including several killings in the provincial capital of Jalalabad. More than 5,000 people gathered at a rally on Sunday in support of Tunisian President Kais Saied. Demonstrators waved Tunisian flags and carried placards railing against Ennahda, the Muslim Democratic Party that is the biggest in parliament and has acted as Saied's main antagonist. On July 25th, the president plunged Tunisia into a constitutional crisis by suspending the elected parliament, dismissing the prime minister and assuming executive authority. Saied stated that the actions were needed to save the country amid unrest over financial troubles and the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic.
We want Kais Saied to take over and hold the MPs and the parties accountable, not to step out of the political game. Over the last 10 years, where has the money gone, and what have they done with it? Let all the corrupt take responsibility. What Kais Saied did is incredible and an extraordinary thing. Why did he do it? To eliminate corruption and get the corrupt out of the country. The only person who has done his duty is Kais Saied.
And the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, said the interference of foreign actors in the region is a source of discord and damage, calling on the regional states to follow the example of Iran for power and rationality. Ayatollah Khamenei praised Iran's armed forces in a virtual address to a ceremony held for graduates of military academies in Tehran, calling them a defensive shield in the true sense of the word against the hard threats of the external and internal enemies. His remarks came after Iran's army held military exercises on its northwestern border, with Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian stated that Tehran does not tolerate the Zionist regime's activity against its national security, referring to Israel's relations with neighboring Azerbaijan. Ayatollah also described security as the basic infrastructure of all necessary activities for Iran's development, saying it is important to achieve security without relying on foreigners. And North Korea has accused the United Nations Security Council of applying double standards over military activities among the UN member states, amid international criticism over its recent missile tests. The Council met behind closed doors on Friday upon request from the United States and other countries over the North's missile launches. The meeting came a day after Pyongyang fired a newly developed anti-aircraft missile, the latest in a recent series of weapons tests, including the launches of a previously unseen hypersonic missile, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles with potential nuclear capabilities. The director of the North Korean Foreign Ministry's Department of International Organizations said the Security Council meeting was an open ignorance of his country's sovereignty and a serious intolerable provocation. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.